We had a college football playoff top 25, and it's really all chalk.
It is, but I do think there's one thing that's substantial to it, and that is the fact that now, for the first time, we have an acknowledgement from the College Football Playoff Committee that the room considered Miami and Notre Dame in the same conversation and decided the head-to-head didn't matter. Think whatever you like. There are two sides.
That's been consistent.
Right, it is.
That's been the same over the last several weeks.
But the committee chair had said in the past, well, the two teams weren't really seen in the same light. Now we find out that this time they were discussed in the same group as Alabama and BYU. So they were in the same quadrant. They were in the same discussion. It wasn't, well, this team's not even close enough. This was, these two teams are in the same exact meeting with the committee, and the committee says, I don't care about the head-to-head. And I see both sides, Caroline, because frankly, these two teams played, and there was an outcome. And that's where a lot of people go to today. But I'll also remind the world, much like I've said this several times, the Raiders beat the Patriots week 1. Doesn't mean the Raiders are better than the Patriots. It means the Raiders beat the Patriots week 1. This is sort of a college football equivalent. I know it's a different league and there's a different tier for these things, but the committee is looking at Notre Dame today saying, I don't care what happened in the beginning of the year. I believe Notre Dame is better today. I understand that, but then my argument is, why ever play out of conference games in the beginning of the season if they're simply not going to be factored into the committee's decisions?
But I think they are factored into the committee's decisions. What's really easy for us to do, and look, I will nitpick committee's decision-making all day long. It's one of my favorite things to do. I think it does matter. But I think that the committee has to look at a million different factors, and it's easy for us to just pick one of them. Where the committee has to consider 15 factors, we can say, well, head to head. And the committee can come out and say, okay, well, strength of schedule, strength of record, eye test. And look, my thing with Miami is if you're upset that right now, today, if the college football playoff started tomorrow, Miami would be the last team in, don't lose at home to Louisville. Don't lose on the road at SMU. Don't lose these games that you have no business losing, and then you won't be questioned. Your resume won't be questioned, because I have been on record, and I believe it, and I said it until I was red in the face, and I'm not going to walk that back. In the first 5-6 weeks of the season, I thought Miami looked like one of the best teams in the country. I mean, I was talking about Miami being the number 1 team in the country, but since then, Miami's fallen off. Miami hasn't looked the same. Carson Beck hasn't looked the same. I even said that at the time when I was saying Miami was one of the best teams in the country. I said, I'm holding my breath for Carson Beck to make some of these dumb mistakes. Well, they came to fruition against Louisville. Notre Dame, on the other hand, has just continued to look better and better week over week. CJ Carr has looked better week over week. Jeremiyah Love, who we'll talk about here in just a moment, has looked like one of the best, if not the best teams, or best players in college football. Their defense has gotten better week over week. It didn't look that great in the first couple weeks of the season. So you say head-to-head has to matter. I agree 10,000%. Head-to-head absolutely has to matter. But what also has to matter is teams getting better week over week, and teams playing their best football closer to the CFP than the summertime. And Miami was playing their best football at the beginning of the season. Notre Dame's playing their best football right now.
Well, and you're right. Everything you just said is right. And I want to be clear here. If I was on the committee today, I think I would probably put Notre Dame ahead of Miami. Because at the end of the day, my job is to find the top 12. And who do I think are the top 12 right now today? It's not who was the top 12 week 1. And, I watched Booger and Joey Galloway last night argue about this ad nauseum, going back and forth. And I think the problem is both guys are right. Like, this is where a human committee, one committee member might come in and say, hey, I value head-to-head. The other committee member might come in and say, I value where they are today. But the hardest part about this is that Miami is not likely. Like, as of now, Miami would sneak into the playoffs. But understanding that mathematically the chances of Miami getting the ACC championship game is almost non-existent. So while in today's bracket that everybody sees, Miami's in the college football playoff, I think the reason so many college football people are freaking out about this is there's a real acknowledgement that when we get our final brackets as of now, Miami's not going to be in, because that spot's going to go to an ACC champion. So I think the hardest part about this is you're right. But the other part about this that really just sucks and there's no solution is this isn't going to be solved on the field. You see the bracket there. Miami is a placeholder because they are right now the highest ranked ACC team. So in this improper way of showing you what the bracket would look like, what everybody's showing you is where the top ranked ACC team is. But when that team's not going to the ACC championship game, that means they won't be the highest ranked ACC champion, which means likely the actual highest ranked ACC champion who will be worse than Miami, will be sitting in that slot. And Miami, who beat Notre Dame, is going to watch Notre Dame in the college football playoffs. It's a worst case scenario, and it sets a dangerous precedent for whether or not you should schedule in the future to a high degree, Caroline. But that being said, I don't disagree with you. Notre Dame's better. I don't know how to handle this.
And that's why I keep going back to we need to allow teams to get better over time. Like my message would be, hey, schedule those non-conference power four kind of games because teams will get rewarded for that. Teams should get rewarded for that. I value that. I think that is one of the most important things moving forward. And one of the most important factors that I keep in mind when we talk about playoff structure in the future is we have to incentivize scheduling these games because I don't want to watch rinky-dink State University go on the road at Ohio State and get blown out 58-0. That's not fun to me. I want to watch Texas, the preseason #1 team in the country, going on the road to the reigning national champions. That is what's great about college football. So I think what the committee is doing is showing Notre Dame, hey, look, we acknowledge that you lost that early season game to Miami. You lost that early season game to Texas A&M. And if Notre Dame wasn't explosive and didn't look as good as they look now, I don't think Notre Dame would be in over Miami. But what they're doing is they're incentivizing Notre Dame for getting better week over week over week. Miami gets credit for scheduling and beating Notre Dame early in the season because if they didn't, they wouldn't even be in the college football playoff conversation. Take Notre Dame out of Miami's schedule and insert like Duquesne or Mercer. No disrespect to Duquesne or Mercer. Miami wouldn't be the number 12 team in the country, but they're the number 12 team in the country and not the number 9 or number 8 team in the country because they lost at home to Louisville. So it's not just winning those non-conference games. You also have to take care of business on the rest of your schedule as well.
A fair point that as you look at this from both sides of the coin, one thing that should be pointed out while I'm sitting here screaming, not giving an incentive for winning these games is a reason not to schedule them. You're making a very valid counterpoint that not being punished for losing this game is an incentive for scheduling them. And it just shows you that, however, for anyone that thinks that this is universal, it's the farthest thing from. Now, part of the reason Notre Dame is in this conversation is because they have a Heisman caliber running back. In fact, if you don't believe us, just remember when Jeremiyah Love was on this show and talked about his chances at winning the Heisman. Check this out.
To all the people who are out there, the voters or whatever, I would say just look at my game, look at my play style, and I'm going to go out there and just do what I do every single week. And if you think that's worthy enough for me to win the Heisman, then that's great. But, whether I win the Heisman, whether I don't, I'm just going to go out there and just do what I do and just be me. And if you think that's worthy enough, then that's great.
Joe Theismann saying he should be the front runner for the Heisman. They're like, it's also a year that ends in 5. We'll get to that in a second. Here are the Heisman Trophy odds via BetMGM. Fernando Mendoza is the favorite right now, -105. Jeremiyah Love is second at +375. And this one's tough because Mendoza, obviously the quarterback of Indiana. Quarterbacks get love. Indiana gets love. But it's a year that ends in 5, Caroline. And I point that out because years that end in 5 are electric for running backs. For anyone that hasn't seen the history on it, if you go back year to year, if you go back every decade, years that ends in 5. In 2015, Derrick Henry won the Heisman. In 2005, Reggie Bush won the Heisman. In 1995, Eddie George won the Heisman. 85, Bo Jackson won the Heisman. It's a year that ends in 5. Jeremiyah Love's got to win the damn thing.
Yeah, Jay Berwanger winning the Downtown Club Award in 1935. I remember it well. Jay laid the framework for modern day college football. Jay was truly a pioneer in NIL. Okay, call me crazy, but this isn't just like, the past couple of years a running back has won it in a year that ends in 5. This is going back to 1935. This is crazy. What a wild little, trend and statistic that we have here. In 2015 too. Derrick Henry won the Heisman, but do you know who was the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy in 2015? It was Christian McCaffrey. It was the year of the running back in college football. So it's not only history on Jeremiyah Love's side. It's not only just this fun, funky voodoo that we have in a year that ends in 5 that's, going Jeremiyah Love's way. It's also his numbers and it's also his impact. Jeremiyah Love right now has 1,300 rushing yards, which doesn't even scratch what Ashton Genty had last year. I will wholeheartedly admit that. Ashton Genty had 2,600 yards last season. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I think Ashton Genty would have won the Heisman last season as a running back if there was a man like, I don't know, named Travis Hunter, who is an absolute alien. If he wasn't in college football, it would have been Ashton Genty. But I think what we have to look past is beyond the numbers, because I think the numbers are one chapter in the story of a Heisman Trophy season. Jeremiyah Love has had several quote unquote Heisman moments. If it wasn't 3 touchdowns against Syracuse, if it wasn't 230 rushing yards against USC, a ranked team, a team that was on the bubble for the college football playoff before they lost this past week, Jeremiyah Love against Navy, this was his Heisman moment, in my opinion. Against Navy, a Navy defender tackled him, had him on the ground, but Jeremiyah Love never touched the ground. So what he did was just rolled over this Navy defender, popped right up and ran like 30, 40 yards into the end zone. Look at that! Do I need a better example of a Heisman moment than what Jeremiyah Love is doing his best alphabet impression and defying gravity and looking like Simone Biles in the air doing it, just contorting his body in a funky way? Like, Jeremiyah Love has the numbers. He plays for a team that is legitimately in the national championship conversation, and he has had these electrifying moments. He has a Heisman Trophy resume.
There is no doubt. Unfortunately, I don't think he controls his own destiny, but fortunately, I think there's a real path. Because remembering that Fernando Mendoza is likely going to end up in the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State, right? That is the moment, not just for Fernando Mendoza, but also for Jeremiyah Love. If Mendoza comes in and absolutely has a great game, and Indiana gives Ohio State, they don't even have to win. If Mendoza is just a star in that game, Mendoza is going to win the Heisman. I think that's pretty clear. But there is a possibility here that Fernando Mendoza steps on the field against an Ohio State team that, frankly, really hasn't played anybody all year, and this is their chance to make a major statement. They've been waiting for it. They're ready for it. They unleash the beasts, and in the process, they do to Indiana what we thought teams would do to Indiana last year. There's the chance here that Fernando Mendoza gets sort of run off the field by an Ohio State defense that tricks and fools him, and all of a sudden Mendoza is part of the reason Indiana loses. If Mendoza goes into the Big Ten championship game and lays an egg, I think that does leave the runway for someone else to win. And in a year where we haven't seen anyone differentiate themselves, I think that Jeremiyah Love absolutely could, Caroline, depending on what Fernando Mendoza does in the Big Ten championship game. The path is still there. I don't think anybody else would necessarily jump up. It would take something epic, but Jeremiyah Love could jump up if Fernando Mendoza has a meltdown.
If Diego Pavia just absolutely goes off against Tennessee and has some wild and crazy moments in a Vanderbilt win, in a on the road at Neyland, I think that Diego Pavia can kind of emerge right back into that conversation. He's kind of fallen off over the last couple of weeks, but where things stand right now, anything can change in rivalry week, but where things stand right now, it does feel like a two-man race.